Hello everyone. Welcome to the second of the Telegraph's January Health Reset sessions. My name is Chloe Lambert. I'm the Health Features Editor at the Telegraph and Senior Commissioning Editor. It's great to see you all getting involved and chatting away already. So tonight's session is the Immunity Reset. We have 45 minutes, and joining me will be Dr. Jenna Macciochi, the immunologist and author of Immunity, the Science of Staying Well. So it's a real treat for all of us. Jenna specializes in understanding how nutrition and lifestyle interact with the immune system in health and disease. She is a qualified fitness instructor and health coach and lectures at the University of Sussex. She has over 20 years experience in immunology, and her mission is to break down the science and share the secrets of how to be well for good. Here we are. Hello, Jenna. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I know some of you have submitted questions to us in advance, which is fantastic, but I'll also be keeping an eye on the live chat. So do keep sending all your comments and questions there. The chat bar is on the right-hand side of your screen. We will try to tackle as many of your queries as possible, but please be aware we may not be able to address very specific questions about particular health conditions. So let's dive right in. Jenna, really glad to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to start by asking you about COVID. It's made us all obsessed with immunity and why some people get ill, some people get viruses, and some people get sicker with them than others. Is that a good thing, do you think? Has that been a positive outcome of this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting year, hasn't it? Particularly in my field as an immunologist. I think it's really great to see people getting an interest in their immune system and also having to understand a bit more about their immune system. You know, we've all been watching the news and getting familiar with new terms and phrases to do with our immune system. We also saw skyrocketing sales of vitamin C back last spring when the pandemic, the first lockdown happened here in the UK. And I feel like we've come a long way since then. Hopefully people are starting to understand that caring for your immune system is not just about taking vitamin C tablets, and we'll go into a little bit more about that tonight, I'm sure. And it's put, you know, the immune system really firmly at the table when it comes to conversations about our health and having an agency over our health. So there's really an interest in how we can really care for our immune systems. And part of my job is really getting the right message out and making sure that we overcome misinformation, because with the rise of anything, there's always what I call immunity greenwashing. So people stepping up and using it as a marketing tool, which makes it very hard, I think, to navigate what we should and shouldn't do.
Diet, supplements that promise to boost our immunity, and I know that's quite a controversial word. How far is that possible? How much is our immune system set or determined from birth or genes, and how far can we tinker it with the things we eat, the exercise we do, and etc.?
I think that's a great question. That's a great starting point. The first thing I would say is that the way your immune system is designed is that half of it is actually designed to turn the other half off. So it's less about boosting and more about balancing, because as much as you want it to respond to infection, it can also damage our own delicate cells and tissues when it's trying to fight off bacteria and viruses. So we have to have measures in place to kind of stop that overshooting. And we've seen this with COVID. If an immune system overshoots, then the person can be very, very sick and end up in hospital. And when it comes to how much we have control of our immune system, I think it's important to look at it as, you know, it's influenced by things that are within our control and things that are outside of our control. So genetics is certainly part of the story. And one of the things that's been really clear this year is that we've seen with COVID a huge spectrum of responses. So you have, you know, healthy young people who are ending up in hospital, and then you have healthy young people with no symptoms at all. And I think it's important to remember that actually we do see a spectrum in how people respond to all sorts of infections. But because COVID has been so under the microscope, we've kind of really, this has been something that's been really obvious. But if you think about, if people in your household get a cold, maybe some of you don't even experience the cold at all. And this is kind of a design of the immune system that has helped us survive as a species, because if we all responded the same to every infection, then we would have died out as a species by now. So there's an inherent variation, and then layered on top of that is all the kind of diet and lifestyle things, which, roughly speaking, they say it's kind of 30% genetics, 70% diet and lifestyle, and you sort of, I call it your immunobiography, so everything that you've experienced from when you're born.
Well, let's talk then about what you can do to reset your immunity. What should people be doing right now? And maybe diet is a good place to start. What would you say the golden rule are? And can you talk a bit about the role of the gut and how our diet affects our guts and the link with immunity there?
That's a great point. So most people probably have in mind vitamin C when they think of their diet and their immune system. And it is true, when your body is fighting an infection, your need for vitamin C shoots up, and your immune cells use so much more. But vitamin C is found in lots of foods, like foods that you wouldn't even think it's found in. And it's very easy to get your recommended daily allowance. So I would save your pennies on your vitamin C supplements for now and focus on getting a really good diet. And the second thing to consider is that supplements are there to supplement your diet, to prevent you from becoming deficient. And in terms of your immune system, you need to avoid deficiencies in all of the key micronutrients. These are the vitamins and minerals that are deemed essential for you to function. And so we don't necessarily need to take more than we need. We need to make sure that we're not deficient and we have a healthy level. And for all the vitamins and minerals, we can get these from a balanced diet, with the exception of vitamin D. Or if you have a specific diet where you restrict foods or follow something like a vegan lifestyle, then you might have to supplement for the things that you're not getting from your diet. But I always advocate for a food first approach, and there's a very specific reason for that, because food comes with things that you cannot find in supplements. It provides us with fiber, which is kind of like the fertilizer for your gut microbes. Now, these have also been in the headlines this year with regards to COVID, because they're kind of like the rheostat for your immune system. The gut bugs are training your immune system from birth, and teaching it how to respond properly. They're also helping you digest your food. They're producing vitamins and nutrients when they digest your food. And they're producing a plethora of other things that are absorbed into your bloodstream and have sort of far-reaching activities throughout the body, like anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and antioxidant properties. So it's really important that we try to get our nutrition from food. And food also contains things called phytonutrients. So these are the chemicals found in plant foods, things like quercetin, curcumin, and turmeric. We hear about these kind of buzzwords every now and again, but actually there's over 20,000 of them. So we really want to be focusing on food because they're kind of acting in concert. So that's kind of the best starting point. And then if you have a specific condition or fall into a specific age category or follow a specific diet, you might need to then supplement depending on your sort of personal needs. Exactly. I think it's as a good rule of thumb, we want to really eat the rainbow. It's all about different colored produce, fresh produce, so fruits and vegetables, but also beans and pulses, so like lentils, chickpeas, different types of beans, whole grains, and don't forget things like herbs and spices, all of the things that give flavor. These also contain all of these really great phytonutrients. And what we want to do in the body is sort of follow a kind of anti-inflammatory diet pattern where we kind of keep the baseline inflammation as low as possible. And this is inflammation is what your body is doing when it's fighting an infection, but it's also a contributor to chronic diseases. So we want to, when we're feeling healthy and we don't have an infection, we want to minimize any inflammation. And the reason I like to talk about diet patterns is because we're kind of now at the stage where we know enough that we can move away from focusing on individual nutrients, because we don't eat nutrients, we eat food. So it's really important to think about what foods are you eating across the week, and getting that diversity of fresh produce in every meal, lots of leafy greens, lots of orange fruits and vegetables at this time of year, and then the dark purple berries, these kind of things. And that means that if you've got that kind of buffer, it doesn't matter if you have a meal that's maybe not so nutritionally dense, because most of the time what you're eating is really good and it's really nurturing for your immune system.
Great questions from the readers. Lots about prebiotics, probiotics. Can you explain about that?
Mm-hmm.
And whether we should be taking them, or whether, again, is it better to try and get them from foods like kefir, fermented foods, stuff like that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I know it's a tricky one to navigate. So what I would say is that we're all very unique in our gut microbiome, and so if I take a probiotic and you take a probiotic, it might be doing different things because it's interacting with our different bugs. There is some evidence that taking a probiotic can help minimize things like sick days off work and minimize sort of routine upper respiratory tract illnesses like the common cold. We still don't know enough about COVID at the moment. But it's not something I routinely think people need to necessarily spend their money on. There is a great body of evidence to show that it can be helpful to take a probiotic when you have diarrhea and upset stomach, for example, but there's not the evidence for healthy people with no underlying conditions to take a probiotic. I do think it is important to sort of nurture the bugs that you have with this sort of fertilizer, so making sure you're eating the right foods, and then adding things like the fermented foods is also going to help cultivate a really healthy and diverse microbiome. So this is kind of a good starting point.
And I know antibiotics, the evidence really is mounting about the effect they can have on the microbiome.
Yes, I know it's really challenging because antibiotics do save lives and they do have a really important place in clinical care of people, but I think there was a period where they were really overused, and probably some of us are paying the price for that because we've maybe had multiple rounds of antibiotics when it perhaps wasn't so necessary. So I would say that, you know, definitely have that conversation with your doctor and try and reserve them for when they are strictly necessary for your health situation. And at the same time, think about taking a probiotic afterwards to help with that recovery of your gut microbiome.
Perhaps should just talk about vitamin D now as well. I mean, you've just been saying that it's always to get your nutrients from food where possible, but this is when we can't from food, or indeed from some in countries like the UK and many others. So are you, in terms of COVID, pretty convinced by its role in preventing people from getting ill with COVID? And do you take it yourself? Do you think we should all be taking it, and how much?
So I've been a long time vitamin D supplementer, and I'm always trying to get my friends and family to supplement. And my kids, I use a little spray because it's much easier for them to take. So it is the one nutrient that we all really struggle to get from our diet. It is found in fortified foods and things like oily fish, but it's just so hard to get enough. And we're actually photosynthetic creatures, that we make it through this reaction in our skin in the active form. And because of where we live in the UK right now, we just cannot get enough from the sun. So there's also some other reasons why we might be deficient. So if you have a darker skin tone, your skin doesn't make this reaction very well. It also, your ability to make your own vitamin D from the sunlight decreases as you age, and it can depend on body fat stores as well, because it's a fat soluble vitamin. So it is something that we should regularly supplement with. I think if you're really concerned, there are simple tests online with like a little prick blood test where you can find out your level. You can also talk to your GP. I think the current recommendations from the NHS is 10 micrograms a day for everyone. And you can find this in different formats depending on what is most comfortable for you to take. And I'm really convinced there's quite substantial and very strong evidence to support its role in minimizing the number of and severity of respiratory tract infections and things like pneumonia and influenza and the common cold. And now we're also seeing this body of evidence is starting to develop with COVID. Many of you would have seen the headlines around vitamin D throughout this year, and there's a big clinical trial starting in the UK looking at vitamin D. And ultimately, we need these really rigorous trials to be able to make a strong statement on the role of vitamin D in COVID. But I think from a general health perspective, then it's definitely one that we should all be taking.
Down that for us.
Yeah, so I would always check the guidelines in your area. I know that not everyone is in the UK, and I think there's a different system. For example, in the US, how it's in the international units, whereas in the UK we're using micrograms. I think 10 micrograms a day all year round is sort of minimum of what everyone should take. And the upper limit of when you would start getting problems is huge. So always follow the guidelines on your pack and check for the national guidelines in your area, like the NHS in the UK. I can't hear you.
That it's worth considering. Do you take any others, may I ask, other than vitamin D?
So I take vitamin D. The other one that I take is an omega-3 oil because this is something that we get from oily fish, and there's not actually an official recommended daily allowance for omega-3, but in the UK it's advised that we eat oily fish twice a week. So if you're not eating oily fish twice a week, then it's definitely something that you should be supplementing with. This is a type of fat that is incorporated into the membranes of our cells, particularly our immune cells, and it helps the immune cells be very fluid, it helps them move around the body. And when we're fighting an infection, the immune cells take this from their membrane and use it to produce different molecules that are really important in fighting the infection, but particularly important in resolving the infection, stopping the inflammation from overshooting and damaging our tissues, healing up and repairing and bringing everything back to normal after we've had some sort of immune response going on. So it's really important, and it's something that's quite well tolerated by most people. So it's definitely one that I would take all year round. Apart from that, I don't take anything else. I really try and focus on my diet. We also have to think about protein. It's not one that maybe comes to the forefront of your mind when you think about your immune system, but all those antibodies and cells and molecules that your immune system is producing when you're fighting an infection, they're all made from protein. So we need to provide those building blocks to let your immune system be able to produce those. And actually, protein energy malnutrition is one of the key immunodeficiencies worldwide. So it's particularly important as we age to ensure that we get enough protein. This also helps maintain muscle mass. And the next thing I would say is that actually your body composition has a huge impact on your immune system and its ability to do its job. So what I mean by that, we need to have a good balance of muscle mass to fat mass, because both of these are immunologically active tissues, so we need both in the right amounts. And we start losing muscle as we age quite naturally. It's just part and parcel of aging, and we need to work hard to maintain that muscle mass. So making sure you've got enough protein in your diet is a really important part of that.
Right, also important. And exercise. Sorry? Right, also important for muscles and immunity. I think that's something that a lot of us don't really think about as a benefit of exercise, but it really is quite clear.
Yeah. It's, you know, if you don't use it, you lose it, sadly. And inactivity does lead to muscles being withering away because we're not using them. So you have to, you know, make sure you have enough protein in your diet, but you also have to give your muscles some kind of resistance in your day-to-day life. I think the current guidelines is a minimum of 2 resistance exercise type sessions per week, and that doesn't mean you have to be in the gym lifting weights. You can be lifting shopping bags, you can be doing push-ups off your kitchen worktop, you can be doing anything that gives your muscles some kind of resistance, and you have to find your own starting point, but just be doing that regularly, and just know that muscle is such an important part of your immune system. And also, in terms of immune aging, it's one of the key ways that our immune system, we can mitigate that aging process, because when we move our muscles, they're producing key molecules that actually nurture some of the glands that produce our immune cells, and they keep them young and rejuvenated. So the muscles are having this direct role with this kind of hub of new immune cell activity.
Idea of that somebody can have an immune age which is different to their biological age, and some of the studies on that with exercise have been really interesting. There was one I saw about cyclists, and they had immune cells of 50 and 60-year-olds who cycled had immune cells of a much younger adult. So presumably it doesn't even have to be anything like, say, very sophisticated. It can just be regular cardiac.
Exactly. Like the study you're talking about, and it's a fabulous study, and they had followed these cyclists, you know, some of them into their 80s, who were part of a cycling club, and they had an immune age that was younger than some sedentary 20-something people that they had compared to. And, you know, we know that your immune system ages, and that can compromise not only our ability to fight infection, but it can increase our risk for chronic diseases associated with inflammation. And it can reduce our ability to recover and repair and heal from injuries and wounds. So it's really important that we kind of try and stave off immune aging as much as possible. And the great news is, it is something that it is possible to minimize. Your immune age can be different from your chronological age, and exercise plays a huge part in that, particularly in keeping muscle mass, and also eating this diversity of colourful plant-based foods like the phytonutrients I mentioned earlier. These are also known as longevity compounds, because they really help with that sort of anti-immune aging effect. So they help kind of keep your immune system young and healthy. But exercise is doing so many other things for your immune system on a day-to-day basis too. So if you consider that your immune cells have to move around your body, and they do this with the lymphatic system, and your lymphatics are a bit like your blood vessel system, but instead of having the heart to pump the blood around, your lymph fluid relies on you moving your muscles to move that fluid around. And this allows your immune cells to perform like a surveillance function, looking out for anything untowards and looking out for infection, and then being able to sort of relay that information to the rest of the body and raise the alarm. And exercise in itself is also anti-inflammatory, so it's helping clear out any unwanted inflammation and keep your sort of baseline inflammation really low, which we know lowers your risk for chronic inflammatory diseases.
Of us, especially at the moment, are using exercise to bust stress and look after our mental health. Can you talk a bit about stress? Because it's slightly confusing, isn't it? A little bit of stress is good for your immune system, but not too much. So how do we get it right? And do you have any kind of tips on things you can do to avoid stress, or to get the right kind of stress?
Yes, I think, I mean, me included, I'm definitely using exercise at the moment for stress busting rather than anything else, just to get through the days. But yeah, stress is kind of, how I like to see it is that, you know, we all have a sort of stress container. So there's always going to be things in our life that are filling our stress container, and we have a container of different sizes. So I'm a little bit of a stress head. I get very easily stressed. So my container is small, it's going to overflow very easily. And we all have sort of ways that we release that stress. So we're emptying the container. And, you know, different things are going to shift that balance all the time. And the reason that stress can be good for us is because it can be very motivating. It has a powerful biological effect on your body. It's making, giving you energy, putting blood sugar levels up so you can, do whatever it is you need to do, action things. It's very motivating. It can make you very focused in the short term because it's designed to get you out of danger. So we have one universal stress response, irrespective of whether you're running for your life, you're about to get hit by a bus, or you're just struggling with a deadline. You have one type of biological stress response going on in your body, and you can feel it. You feel your heart rate changing, your breathing changing. You might feel other changes in your body, like physical changes you can feel when you're stressed. But as I said, it's a short-term response. So it's getting you out of danger. It's motivating you to do something. And because it's quite energy involved, it's triaging that away from your immune system. It's like you're fighting this right now. You don't need to worry about, the head cold that you have. So when stress goes on and on and on, one of the key stress hormones is cortisol. It's actually an anti-inflammatory hormone, and it's turning off your immune system. So when we're stressed constantly or intermittently, then it's going to continually dial down your immune response and leave you much more vulnerable to infection. So we have to kind of think of our own stress container and think of ways to empty that. And what I like to do is really, there's lots of talk about meditation and mindful practices, and these are all great. But if I'm really stressed and I'm in that moment, I'm just not likely to engage in any of those. But what we can do is work on how we're breathing, because there's sort of sensors in the lung that are going to act on the brain, give your brain a message that you're safe, that everything's fine, that you can cope with this. So just by extending the exhale is going to relay the signal to your brain. It's going to try and switch off that stress chemistry and then help, obviously, your immune system recover. And we can also adjust our gaze. So this is a really interesting thing. We spend so much time looking really close at computer screens. But if we go and have a kind of panoramic view, going outside for a walk, for example, looking outside a window, looking far away, it sends a signal to your brain to relax all the stress chemistry too. Because when you're stressed, you become very focused because you're trying to deal with a situation. And by looking far away, you're giving your brain the signal that you can relax, that you're safe. Because ultimately, that's the signal that your body wants to know to turn off the stress response. So there's kind of some real-time tools. But then when we're not stressed, when we're not in that moment of feeling sick about a deadline or panicking about something, then we have to think of all the other practices that we can do in our day-to-day life that keep emptying that stress container little by little every day. And the more of a stress head you are, if you're like me, the more of these little practices you have to engage in so that you stop your stress cup from overflowing. And this is where things like just being mindful, having a bit of self-compassion for what you're going through. This has been shown to actually be quite strongly linked to how our immune system responds. Disclosing how you're feeling, so talking to a friend, writing it down in a journal, for example. These are also kind of techniques. Reframing the stress, so making yourself pause and come back and think about it when you're more objective about the situation. And just learning to be optimistic about things. Some of us are natural optimists. I'm certainly not, but it's a skill that can be learned. So and we have the bigger things like the meditation practices, and even things like exercise. The physical movement is helping your body remove some of that stress chemistry. So I like to think of it as you build up your own suite of different tools that can help you with managing your stress, and just really recognize that no matter what is causing you stress, it's going to have this negative effect on your immune system if it's continual again and again and again. So it's probably this kind of silent thing in our society that's eroding our immune health most of all, and it's not going to be helped by reaching for supplements, for example. You really have to kind of find your ways to manage it, because most of the stresses of everyday life are not going to disappear. It's all about better ways to approach it and deal with it.
that doing things to relax it's not just about indulging yourself and looking after mental feeling better. It's actually going to stop you getting ill and help you live a longer, healthier life. So it really is important to just go get fresh air, walk, do what you need to do to empty your stress container. And I know you're a fan of cold water swimming, is that right?
Yes, I've been getting in the sea, living down here in Brighton whenever I can. A quick dip, particularly on these last few frosty days that we had, which, you know, actually it's so popular now. There's hundreds of people that are engaging in these kind of things right now. And it might seem strange, but this is another way that you know, helps us manage our stress, is by putting ourselves under stress deliberately in a very controlled way, like getting into the ice cold freezing sea in the middle of December. It's very stressful on your body, and it helps release that stress chemistry again, the same stress response, you know, the universal stress response, but it kind of builds your resilience. You kind of go, yeah, I can do this, I've got this. It doesn't have to be for long. It's the same with doing any kind of really challenging exercise, or going into a sauna, or, you know, anything that kind of puts the challenge on your body, but in a way that you're like, yeah, I'm going to embrace this. And that's another way to kind of navigate the stress in your life. It's maybe not one for everyone. You can start with a cold shower, maybe a cold blast in the morning, and then, you know, you kind of step out feeling like, okay, I'm going to win the day today.
Really hard, but you feel amazing. How about oh, so much to ask about, but I do think we should cover sleep, even if you can briefly, because
Yeah.
what the sleep's role in our immune function, and any advice on how to get good sleep, what you should be doing, do's and don'ts.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, if you just consider, we're like circadian animals. We're designed, our biology is designed to be active during the day when it's sunlight, and be resting at night when it's dark, and that's hardwired in our biology, and we can't really escape that, as much as we might like to think that we want to stay up all night and sleep all day. And so following with that, your immune system is geared up for different roles during day and night. During the day, when you're active, it's geared up for you encountering an injury or an infection and being able to fight that off. And when you're sleeping, it's kind of doing its kind of audit. It's replenishing old cells with new cells. It's helping with healing and repair. You know, it's all of those kind of housekeeping functions are happening. So it's really important that we give our immune system both opportunities, you know, the daytime being active and the nighttime when we're rested. And I have real sympathy for anyone who struggles with sleep, because it's something that I also have struggled with, and I've written about this in my book. When several years ago, my whole family and I got a cold, really minor cold, and everybody got well, but I was really not sleeping because I just had a lot of work on, and my sleep had just kind of gone to pieces, and I ended up getting pneumonia because I just, you know, I was still eating well, I was still exercising, doing all the other stuff, but I just wasn't sleeping. So it's kind of like, don't ignore a cold, and don't neglect your sleep. There are known factors that will erode your sleep. So being on any electronic devices in the evening, particularly ones that are close to your face, trying to sleep in a room that's too hot, because actually our body temperature dips when we sleep. So we want to be in a cool room, maybe have a hot bath, which helps draw the body the heat away from your core temperature, and then go into a cool room to sleep. And you know, stop the scrolling at nighttime. I think even we know devices are bad in the evening for our sleep, but also they can induce anxiety, because you start seeing things or reading the news and things that kind of are not going to be helpful to relaxing. I think of it like landing a plane. You know, you really have to have a wind down period. what time do you need to wake in the morning? What's your kind of, when do you have to be up? And then work back from that to try and incorporate 7 to 9 hours. It's different for everyone. You have to kind of work out what works for you. Work back, find out when do you need to be asleep by, and then take into account that it'll take a little bit of time to get to bed and fall asleep, and then start your kind of evening wind down. Now that's really tricky at the moment for parents who are homeschooling, because I'm sure your kids go to bed and that's when you're actually winding up your work because you haven't had time to do it in the day. And I'm hoping that the homeschool, the work juggle is a short-term challenge for us all, but and also any new parents with very young children, I think we can also start to panic that we're not getting enough sleep, and what effect is this going to have on our immune system. And I just want people to have peace of mind that sleep is just one piece of the puzzle, and we should aim for it where we can. Little cat naps have actually been shown to be beneficial if you haven't had a good night's sleep. So if that's a possibility, then definitely try and do that during the day. And avoid caffeine after lunchtime. I think getting out and exercising can also help with sleep later in the day. And there's actually quite a lot of studies that show that getting natural light into your eyes early in the morning helps sort of reset your clock so that you go off to bed better. So I think there's quite a few kind of little things that we can maybe tweak about how our day is set up.
What's your verdict? Are we allowed?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say, probably not what people want to hear, but alcohol isn't helping our immune system. It's probably not so much harming it if you're having 1 or 2 glasses a week, but we have to consider that it is having an effect on our body. It can actually affect the production of new immune cells, and we know we need the old ones to be removed and to new ones to replace them, stop them going wrong. We also know it has quite an effect on the gut, so it can affect the gut biome, which we've talked about earlier is really important for the immune system, and it can affect the lining of the gut, making it a bit more sensitive, a bit more leaky, and yeah, it's a bit of a balance though, because some people right now might get a lot out of really unwinding with a glass of wine, and so you can't really, you have to kind of offset the benefits of that unwinding with the sort of side effects of the alcohol itself. So I think it is about a balance. We really don't need more things to feel bad about right now. I think if you're trying dry January, then that's great. And if you're trying to sort of wind back any alcohol that you might have started drinking more of during the last year, then that's also a positive step.
Obviously, there are certain issues for that group. They may not be able to get out and go swimming in the sea. So what do you have any advice specifically for that age group, for their immunity and wellness?
It's never too late to start. I think there's all sorts of small things that you should be doing. Protein in the diet we mentioned earlier, movement, resistance, exercise. I know for some people they might not be able to go outdoors at all, but there's small things that you can do indoors. Just really making sure you get any kind of movement into your day and resistance exercise within your abilities and from your starting point. Really focusing on a good balanced diet. I think in that category it can be quite beneficial to take a multivitamin designed for that age group, and also the vitamin D supplement, which might be included in the multivitamin. That can be really important. Things like omega-3 fish oils, and just finding ways to engage with people, because we are social beings, and social isolation can be quite stressful, and we've talked about the detrimental effects of the stress response. And actually, we know we might be getting a bit fed up of video calls, but using our mouths and seeing people smile, this is all kind of connected to our nervous system, and it gives us a sense of connection, even if it is on video, that actually helps our brain kind of navigate that stressful experience of feeling a bit isolated. So if you are able to organize to video call with family and friends, And I think that's really important as well in terms of the overall well-being.
Zinc.
Oh, yeah, so again, I think it's really important to remember that we need to make sure that we avoid deficiencies in any vitamin and mineral, not just the ones that we classically associate with the immune system, because the immune system requires them all: vitamin A, the B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, copper, magnesium. You know, there's like the whole host of nutrients that we need, and there's a few that have come up historically as being key, and zinc is one of them. And I think unless you are likely to be deficient, so if you avoid certain foods, for example, then I think it's not something that you need to supplement with per se. But again, if people are not eating the best diet, then zinc could be a really important one to take, because if you're on the lower side, then you're likely to have your immune system would struggle, because your needs go up much more when you're fighting an infection. And there's some evidence to support taking a zinc supplement when you start symptoms of getting a cold or flu. For COVID, we don't know yet, that then your needs go up and you can shorten the duration of the illness by supplementing. It's not one we should supplement with all the time, because it can knock out the absorption of other important minerals. So we need to kind of really, that's again why it's much safer to get things from food, because you have little receptors on your digestive tract that are taking up these nutrients, and some of them share different receptors, and if you're taking too much of one nutrient, you might not get any absorption of other things. So that's why it's always important, I think, if you are confused about supplements, to talk to a qualified nutrition professional or your doctor, because there is a lot of this kind of nuance that gets lost, and because supplements are things that we can all easily just buy off the shelf, it can be quite overwhelming to know what to do for your special situation, for example.
When you feel yourself getting ill, and how lots of us are quite bad at wanting to just download of supplements, take a load of Lemsip, and sort of soldier on and keep going to work. I wonder if you think that attitude may be changing in the era of COVID, and we're all sort of now paying attention to our health a bit more, and maybe less likely to do that and to listen to these more. Do you think that's important?
I think that's a really important point. I think we had this world of presenteeism, I call it, where, you know, people show up for work when they're not very well. They're like dragging themselves in, they're going past the pharmacy, buying every kind of decongestant, you know, pill, whatever they can get, just to get through the day, because you have to show up, you have to be seen to be there. And actually all you're doing is spreading your germs to everyone else, everyone that you've coughed on the way to work, everyone that you sit near. And now with COVID, it's been a kind of, you know, we've all gone back to school and started to learn properly, okay, infection spread by us just being near each other. So you don't want your colleagues coming into work when they have symptoms of anything. And the other thing to remember is that when we feel unwell because we have an infection, that is the actions of your immune system causing those symptoms. It's releasing all sorts of molecules that are fighting the infection, and they're actually making you feel pretty lousy as well. And at the same time, they're acting on your brain, and they're telling your brain to adjust your behavior. This is called sickness behaviors. It's a clinical term for the reason that we feel more tired, lethargic, maybe socially withdrawn, changes to our appetite. You know, all those feelings when you're just a bit yucky. You want to just lie on the sofa and maybe like take a nap. You don't want to go into work. And your immune system's telling your brain to change your behavior, because that's giving you the best chance of getting well. So when we do get sick, the best thing we can do is listen to our bodies. And if you don't feel like going and running around, then you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be going to the gym. You shouldn't be going, you know, into work or to meet people. Obviously, none of us are doing that at the moment because of the lockdown, but we should really be tuning into our sickness behaviors, because that's going to give us the best chance of getting well. Then when you are sick, yes, taking things like vitamin C and zinc have a small chance of maybe shortening the duration of the illness. Now, again, for COVID, we do not know, but it's mostly about rest and recovery and really nurturing your body, getting plenty of rest and sleep, eating the things that are really going to nurture how we're feeling. So sometimes things like soups and hot drinks, they help with congestion, for example. When we suppress our symptoms with the sort of over-the-counter cold and flu drugs, we're just kind of suppressing our immune system. So we have to really give it a chance. It takes about 5 to 7 days for an immune response to really get going, the specific adaptive immune response, the one that gives us memory. So we kind of really need to give it a chance to do its job. And unfortunately, that means that we need to stop our normal course of business, not go to work, and take that time off to recover.
Up really nicely. It's not, there's nothing to it really. A lot of readers here saying this is all stuff that we kind of knew, but it's this year has certainly made us all stop and reassess all these things. So thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. I think it's really complicated for people, and it's really hard to understand that you really just need this 360 approach. All these little things add up in the long term, and ultimately a quick fix would be great, but do all the little things most of the time, and that's what doing the best that you can.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Jenna. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the readers for writing in and sending all your questions and comments. We really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
Bye.